Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 22nd of October 2014, and joining me on this edition are Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
Now they will tremble again at the sound of our silence.
News Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Central Intelligence Agency.
That was the worst Sean Connery.
It wasn't supposed to be. This isn't Sean Connery's line. Do you want it in Connery anyway? In a shit Connery?
Yeah, go on.
Central Intelligence Agency. Now there's a contradiction in terms.
Games Editor Mark Botwright.
Give me a ping, Vasily.
An audio reviewer Ed Selley.
Personally, I'd give us one chance in 3.
Has he had a stroke?
A very serious.
I've seen that face advert or whatever.
No one's seen him in about 4 years, so quite possibly he has.
Well, welcome back to the podcast. We had last week off. I hope you didn't miss us too much because you had the...
You had last week off.
Sorry?
You had last week off.
Did you record a podcast last week?
No, but we were
Yeah,
still
you had
at
the week off then. Right, so we are back. If you did miss us, there was the Games podcast. Mark was taking part in that. Was it any good, Mark?
You asked that
rhetorical question.
Yeah, rhetorical question. Of course it was. It was fantastic.
There you go. So if you want to listen to the Games podcast, go and download that after you've listened to this one. So let's move on swiftly to hardware news, and we're back to putting speakers on the ceiling or on the sidewall, and some news stories of more Auro 3D as well as Atmos processors from Denon and Marantz. Steve, tell us about this.
Yeah, Denon and Marantz, who are part of the same group, D&M group, just to make that clear, they've announced that they are going to be releasing an Auro 3D upgrade. I think it's going to be free, actually. It did say in the press release fee to be determined, but I believe it might be free, actually. But it's going to be an upgrade for their premium receivers, which in this case of Denon is the X5200 and the X4100 and the SR7009 for Marantz. Plus, I think there's also a Marantz processor that will have it as well. And that's going to be released, I believe, in December. And so basically you'll have a choice of Atmos or Auro 3D on your Denon and Marantz receiver. I guess it's good news in a way, because up until now, Auro has only really been supported by extremely high-end equipment. So this is the first sort of mass-market product to support Auro. Clearly, there's not a lot of Auro product out there, but then again, there isn't a lot of Dolby Atmos product out there either at the moment. But at least it gives the consumer a choice. I guess it's a bit of a coup for Denon and Marantz to be the first to do it, outside of, say, something like the Trinnov I'll talk about in a minute, which is, a 20 grand processor. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see exactly how it's implemented. I've just got the SR7009 in for review. It came this morning. So I'll be reviewing the Atmos side of that over the next week or so, 2 weeks. And it'll be interesting to see how they implement Auro 3D, how it's set up, how Atmos is set up, how you do a room EQ, this kind of stuff in light of the new formats. But certainly it's the first step towards both of them becoming more mass market formats.
Nice to see you give yourself plenty of time to get that review done there, Steve. 2 weeks, yeah. I think that's plenty, isn't it?
Yeah, sure we do. Well, you don't want to rush it, do you? What do you think?
So that's Denon and Marantz. Obviously, Auro 3D, like I say, it's only been in the high-end processors like the Datasat, but there's a new one coming along, a high-end processor called the Altitude 32.
Altitude 32, yeah.
32 channels.
It can be up to 32 channels. In fairness, it comes in different sort of flavors. There's an 8-channel, a 16-channel, I think it's a 24-channel, and also the full Monty 32-channel. They did a demo of it week before last, at a sort of a home install place with a really, really nice custom install home theatre there. These guys actually were the guys that built the cinema at Dolby's Soho offices, so they really know their stuff, and it was a pretty impressive home cinema. But this processor, it's quite different from most, well, certainly all the others, I think. It doesn't use DSP chips. It's entirely uses an Intel motherboard and does all the processing in-house, which means it's relatively easy to upgrade it. If a new format comes along, rather than having to buy in a new chip, they can just do a firmware update within the using Intel processor. So in that sense, it's kind of future-proof. It currently supports Atmos. It will be supporting Auro 3D very soon, and possibly other formats as well, should they come along. Now, obviously, that's great. The downside is it's well, even in its cheapest form, it's about 18 grand. But in order to at least have Atmos and Auro and sufficient channels to do that, you would need to get the 16-channel version at the very least with the Atmos and Auro upgrade. And that's basically going to be 20 grand. If you want the full 32 channels, that's total cost would be 24,000. And there's an extra 500 quid if you want the silver version as opposed to the matte black one. Although I quite like the matte black one. 500
quid just for the silver?
Yeah, 500 quid just to have it in the silver version. No, it's high end, no question about that. It's going to be going into
no shit, Sherlock.
Big custom installs. But if you've got the money, and you're doing
this is going to be getting sold to people who don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Basically, isn't it? It's a real shame. But you like myself, you've been to these installs. You've met the owners. The owners haven't got a clue what it is that they paid for. They just know they paid a lot of money. It looks nice. It sounds good, and they can take a box.
I mean, it is an impressive piece of kit. It sounded stunning in the demo that they did. I really was impressed with it. It looks gorgeous. It's incredibly flexible in terms of setup, in terms of EQ. The EQ software is stunning. It uses a multi-directional microphone and can actually position and pinpoint all the speakers in the room within three-dimensional space when it's doing the EQ. You can have separate crossovers and use different channels for different crossovers. I mean, it is really flexible. It's very impressive. It weighs a ton. The back connections are superb. It is 20 grand, but at least you know where the money went.
It's got a nice back panel, is it?
Yeah, and that gorgeous back panel, yeah.
And like any other piece of home cinema equipment, it will be on sale on the AVForums classifieds in 2019 for 150 quid.
Well, maybe not if it can be upgraded. And
I've seen if I had £1 for every time I'd seen supposedly future-proof pieces of AV equipment, and honestly, how many of them are still actually doing it? None, I think is the honest answer.
Well, certainly I think it would remain valid for at least the next decade.
All right, well, we'll have to see how we get on. I mean, I might have, shuffled off this.
But what you can do with it is you can do a full. I saw it in a 7.4.4 configuration, so that's 7 channels, seven normal channels plus 4 subs, one in each corner of the room, and then 4 overhead speakers. But with this, I think you can do up to something like 10 or 12 overhead speakers if you wanted to, assuming you had the 32-channel version.
Oh, your wife's going to love you.
Yeah, you can really do a full serious Atmos install, or alternatively, you could do the Auro install. And interestingly, and this is probably important from the point of view of something we're going to talk about in a minute, but what it can do is it can, if you've only got speaker set up for one of those sound formats, you can virtually move them in the software in order to create an Auro or Atmos setup, depending on how you've got your speaker set up initially. Or alternatively, if you've got 30 channels, you could also do 2 complete separate setups, one for Atmos and one for Auro, but you're going to have a hell of a lot of speakers in your room.
Even if I win £143 million on Tuesday, I can say with some assurance that I won't be going anywhere near it. But
I would have to agree on that. Having said that, the Denon X5200 with Atmos and Auro, that looks quite. And 11 channels of amplification, that's quite saucy. I could see myself going for that.
Okay.
If I had any money.
Yeah, it does help. Right, so that's 32 channels at 20 grand. Denon and Marantz bringing Auro 3D in at reasonable.
Well, yeah, the 5200
levels.
just for the record is £1,600, which is not over the top for an 11-channel receiver that does Auro and Atmos. It's pretty good, actually.
Okay, so there's not just Atmos and Auro. Also, we have DTS who have announced or about to announce a launch of their similar format. They weren't going to sit by the sidelines on this, were they? Really, they had to get involved. Although they were first to market with Neo X, but then again, like DTS Discrete, nothing really made of it, and it kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah, only because I think there's only one disc that's ever released that had it in the first place, which was The Expendables 2. I think it had a 11.1 DTS Neo X soundtrack. I mean, I guess the problem with DTS Neo X was that it was a stopgap before we got to where we are now. But it'll be interesting to see what DTS do. I mean, this isn't really news except breaking news in the way they've been talking about what they've been previously referring to as multidimensional audio, MDA. And I'm sure Mark Hodgkinson can explain why MDA may not be a very good name for a product.
On the contrary, I think it's a brilliant name for a product. I just like it if they actually admitted that they weren't going to actually supply any additional programming, processing or speakers, but you were just going to receive a special tablet through the post every time you wanted to watch a film, and it would be fantastic.
It would make it certainly make it a more immersive experience, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and no clutter.
I felt the sudden urge to give everyone in the room a hug.
Anyway, so they're not going to call it that now, apparently, for whatever reason. It's going to, I believe, and it's obviously we're waiting for confirmation in probably at CES, I suspect, Phil, but it's going to be UHD, DTS UHD, which is going to really confuse the consumer, isn't it?
Actually, that might be quite clever on DTS's part.
You reckon they'll just jump on the bandwagon of?
Yeah, I think that's the reasoning behind it. You know, if you wanted to try and get some consumer awareness, and UHD's being touted around on TV, so yeah, I think they might actually be quite clever with that one.
I'd go with crack sound.
Anyway, I mean, as I said, it's not exactly news. I've been talking about this for about a year and a half now, so it's not new. But what is, I suspect, hopefully going to be news is they will be launching it officially at CES in January. And I guess what we want to know is, and I have researched on the internet, I couldn't find any real information about exactly how the speakers are meant to be set up, how it's going to be delivered. So that will be interesting. Clearly,
it's got quite a flexible speaker configuration, hasn't it?
Well, let's hope it has, because what you ideally want is you don't want the current situation where you have 2 formats or 3 formats all using completely different speaker configurations.
Well, you see, this is where we're going, because you got Atmos, which is on the ceiling, you got Auro, which is 30 degrees above ear. So there you go. You got 2 different approaches already. And we don't know what DTS's MDA UHD setup's going to be. Maybe the MDA is for the partner. Maybe you give the partner the pill. So you can then start fitting the speakers in the room. I never thought of it that way.
It will be interesting to see what they do, because obviously because at the moment, if you buy a Blu-ray, if you went through your Blu-ray collection, I reckon
collection
Blu-ray collection, I reckon 90% of them will be DTS HD Master Audio soundtracks.
Yeah.
The only studio I know that regularly uses or almost exclusively uses Dolby True HD is Paramount, and so it's no coincidence that it's a Paramount movie. There's the first Atmos disc, which is Transformers. So, if studios aren't using Dolby True HD, there's not necessarily going to be much room for Atmos to really get into the marketplace, where DTS do have a monopoly at the moment, or almost a monopoly. And therefore, it might be a lot easier for them to get their format out on discs quicker and in larger numbers than Dolby can. And ultimately, it comes down to content, right? If you haven't got enough discs, it's not worth upgrading.
And of course, Auro's technology is agnostic. So
Indeed,
So they could steal a march as well on what's going on. But I think the main thing is, where do you put the speakers after you've managed to get permission to put the extra speakers in the room from your partner? Where do you put them? Who do you set up for? Do you go with Dolby? Do you go with Auro? Do you go with DTS? We don't know what DTS's system is yet. Do we bother? I think is the main question.
Well, I called it an audio format war, and some people had to go at me about that. So it was not a format war, because you've always had DTS and Dolby. Yeah, but DTS and Dolby up until now have had exactly the same speaker configurations. So it's easy to go from one to the other. There's no difference. But as you just pointed out, Phil, if you're comparing Dolby Atmos to Auro 3D, they have totally different speaker configurations.
Yeah, totally.
So we just explain to the listeners what the split configurations are. In terms of Atmos, you've got a number of choices, but basically you can either have a 5 point, but the way they call it is 5.1.2. So that's 5 normal surround speakers, front, left, and right, center, and rear, left, and right. 0.1 is the sub, and then 0.2 is 2 overhead speakers. You can also do
the middle number is always the sun numbers of subwoofers.
Yeah, and the last number is going to be how many overhead speakers you have. So 0.2 would be 2 overheads. So you could have 5.1.4 with 4 overheads. This is the kind of configurations you're going to get on most of the receivers. There are obviously things like the Trinnov where you could go way beyond that, but generally with a receiver you're going to have like a 5.1.4 or maybe a 7.1.4. So the Denon 5200, that's got 11 channels, so you could do 7.1.4. So you'd have 7 surround channels, usual 7 channels basically, plus the sub, and then 4 overhead speakers, or alternatively 4 upward firing speakers.
I can see Mark Hodgkinson's ears pricking up here. Formations, Mark. You can start playing formations with your surround speakers. So you could have 4-4-2, 5-4-1.
I'll prefer a 3-4-3, but it's not going to work, is
it? Whereas Auro, that has various configurations as well, but the basic one is to have additional height speakers over where you have your front left and right and rear left and right speakers. So basically that's a 9.1 system. You can also have, you could have a overhead speaker above, a height speaker rather above the center speaker. So you could have a 10.1. Then there's the Voice of God channel, which is a single overhead speaker directly above the listener, which would be make that 11.1. And I guess if you went the full Monty, you could have, I think they do a 13.1, which would be a normal 7-channel configuration with 4 height speakers and 1 overhead. But as you can see, it's pretty confusing. And more importantly, Atmos and Auro completely different. So what that means is, there is a degree of choice here. You aren't going to be able to just have both. I mean, obviously with the Trinnov, as I mentioned earlier, there is software in there where it can, say you had an Atmos set up, it would be able to virtually move speakers, so to create the effect that they were where they're meant to be for Auro. How effective that is, I don't know, but they claim they can do that. Now, whether that would be available in lower priced AV receivers, I don't know, and whether even if it was, whether it would actually work or not is another issue entirely. So there is a degree here where if you're going to go with one or the other, or I think logically sit on the fence, see which one wins out. And if, as you said a minute ago, DTS has got a different configuration as well, that could really put the the spanner in the works in terms of what people do. So I mean, I can see a lot of people fence sitting here and thinking, well,
I can see all these formats falling flat on their face. Genuinely. That's what I think.
The speaker's falling down on your head.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how good they are, how convincing the experience. The elephant in the room is the room. Which room you're going to use? If it's a living room, forget it. Even with the upward firing speakers, you're still adding more speakers to the room. And anybody that has a partner, or even that's single and has a little bit of pride in how their house looks, is not going to go with these extra speakers. In a custom install where these speakers could be hidden behind acoustical panels and all the rest of it, within their design of the room, it will work. It's where Trinnov will make their money, even if they sell 10 or 20 a year at 20 grand. They're making a nice markup there. The installer's making a nice markup there. The end user's getting something a bit special. It'll work in the commercial theatres because it doesn't matter about the aesthetics. And in the home, I'm sorry, but I am yet to be convinced that any of these formats will succeed.
I'd love to disagree with you, but I can't. I think if any of these formats decides to be willfully different from the others, that's just lunacy. I mean, proper lunacy. I suppose you can sort of see what DTS might be gunning for, in so much as they already have such a significant share of the Blu-ray market through Master HD, and they might. But I don't know. It just strikes me as a way of taking an already very tiny percentage of the market and shredding it to a size where it literally makes nobody any money at all. But
well, I mean, it's one of the fastest dying areas of the AV market is the AV receiver.
Yes,
it's been like that for a number of years, and I almost feel sorry for the AV receiver manufacturers who are trying their damnedest to big up the whole Atmos and Auro 3D thing. I just think that it's not the move that they should have made if they want to improve sales and if they want this to succeed, because it won't. Not in the home environment. Adding more speakers is not the answer.
I think it may have done better, or it might do better, would have done better perhaps, it's the right word, if we had one format universally supported by the studios, on Blu-rays, for example. So if all Blu-rays were DTS and there was a DTS more immersive format available, that might sell. But I think people hate confusion, and having 3 different formats is just going to really confuse the consumer. The few consumers that care, and that's not going to be that many, as you just pointed out, Phil. Yep. Even amongst enthusiasts, I think there'll be a lot of fence sitting and waiting to see. And eventually, I think one of them will win by default. Basically, the other 2 won't get supported.
It's going to come down to content.
Yeah.
The one that wins out in the content battle will be the one, and I think that's going to be DTS, just on the fact of the vast majority of studios use DTS. And that's just the way it is. And Auro might succeed if they can get studio support, because they are system agnostic, like we said. So, but again, we don't know what the DTS setup is. So it's just too confusing. There's too much going on. There's too much willy waving, as we would call it, and not a lot of thought actually going into how this is going to work for the consumer, and that's what scares me. And I think, well, I just can't see it succeeding.
I did see see an interview with a guy from DTS. I can't remember his name now, but he said they seem to be positioning themselves behind the scenes in terms of the production. He said the DTS MDA tools could be used to produce Atmos as well. So I don't know whether that'll give them another advantage.
Well, definitely the DTS one is an object-based system as well, so there seems to be some similarities there. But I mean, there's no love lost between DTS and Dolby, is there?
Used to make Atmos as well, the production tools. So yeah, it looks like they're positioning themselves better than Atmos.
As Phil says, it's the room that kind of dictates what you can do. People can try out 7.1, you can go back to 5.1, you can, pop in some speakers quickly and just see if you've got some old speaker cable lying about. You can't do that with anything rigged up to your ceiling. You just can't. You've got to commit to it fully, and I don't think people are going to go for it.
The only way it's going to succeed is if a speaker manufacturer really thinks out of the box.
Literally.
Yeah, they've got to think about, I'm not joking on this, they've got to think about doing something crazy, like tapping the power from a light fitting and then wirelessly sending it, or something like that. That's just the number of people that are going to install this is the square root of sod all. So you've got to think outside. I hate the phrase outside the box, but you can't just approach this like a normal
outside the cabinet.
Joe, it's interesting. I was speaking to the chap who does the PR for Ellipson a little while back, because there's another product that he represents which we'll be going through for review. But essentially, Ellipson are sort of looking, as speaker manufacturers go, they should be kind of enthusiastic about this. They've got wall mounts, ceiling mounts, suspended ceiling mounts. They have all the mounting options you could possibly imagine, and they're still looking at this like a starving person given a piece of wax fruit. It's just so difficult to envisage how you're going to persuade normal people who take some pride in the decor and finish of their lounge to start chopping it up and putting speakers where previously there have been none. And, when a manufacturer which has got options already is looking at it and going, we're not quite sure how this is going to work, I have no idea what more conventional box loudspeaker manufacturers are going to do. Whether Onkyo's upward firing job represents the only sensible stopgap, I don't know. But you've had a demo of it, Steve, haven't you? Did it work?
Yes, it was quite impressive, actually. Surprisingly so.
That's the only other possibility. So the idea is that we have height speakers or presence speakers or whatever, but then they're not actually at elevation. So slightly anticlimactic, I guess. I think that I think Yamaha are quite weird on this one, because I think they desperately want it to work because they've got 10 years of experience of height channels, and I think they want to sort of demonstrate quantifiable superiority here. But all I would say is, I don't want to sort of spoil the flavour of the review. It'll be out reasonably soon. I promise. Not right at the end of the month. I haven't got time for that actually this time. It does look like they're hedging their bets, though, but they're hedging their bets in a good way, because I've been living with this 3040 for quite a bit now, and all of the other smart receiver features, where I've had other products come through for review and they've promised to do the same thing, but there's always been some sort of catch or some reason why it doesn't work as planned. I will say that absolutely all of the secondary features that have been stacked onto receivers over the last sort of 4 to 5 years, this is the first one I've had where absolutely all of them work, and work as the manufacturer claims they're going to work. So at the very least, they've sort of been hedging their bets and making sure that even if you can't be asked to stick speakers on the ceiling, everything else is pretty good.
So that's an upcoming review, Ed. I think we've now done this subject to death. I think it's time for the forum members to tell us what they think. Are they going to buy into Auro 3D, Atmos, DTS, UHD, MDA, whatever they're going to call it, however they're going to place it out? Are you going to do it? Are you going to add extra speakers in? Do you think the end results are going to be worth the pain? Are they going to be worth the arguments with the other half? How is it going to work out, or is it going to fail? and if I was a betting man, I'd be putting money on abject failure for this. I think they're looking in the wrong direction when it comes to the AVR and how to make it more popular. So what's your thoughts? Put it in the podcast forum underneath this podcast. And just to wrap up on the hardware section, Ed did allude to a review that he's got coming up. Anything else, Ed?
Yeah, I've finished writing, and hopefully it will be available to Steve to stick up by the time the podcast comes out if he chooses to. I've talked at length about it before, but finally the review of the Noble Kaiser K10 earphone for £1,000. That'll be good to go. And then there are two others that will join over the course of the month, maybe 8 or 9 minutes before the end of it. We'll see how that goes.
Okay. So, Steve, what else have you got coming this month in terms of equipment?
I've got Cambridge Audio's Minx Go wireless speaker, which is a little portable, rechargeable wireless speaker.
Presumably you mean the G2, right?
Yes,
we've already
yes.
done. Yeah, this is
the
Go.
latest version of the Go, which looks identical to the previous version. All fairness said.
This is true, but I think as you've already reviewed the Go, they just make one just pointing out to people that you don't have some sort of brain disease.
Yes,
you've actually chosen
latest
something
version
new to do.
of the little wireless speaker, and is it just as good as the one before?
Yeah.
And Optoma's GT 1080, which is relatively cheap.
1080?
1080p projector, yeah. The clue is definitely in the name on that one, and aimed, as the G might suggest, at the gamer. So that's.
And you review it.
Oh
yeah,
I've got a games console.
Yeah, he's got a PS4. You know. Yeah, he's now a gamer.
I've always had a PS3.
Yeah, but did you use it for
first level in Killzone yet?
No. Oh well, I've been mucking about with all the free games you get on PSN. So.
Right, and to wrap things up, Mark, what have you got coming?
Currently doing the what we probably call a mid-range 4K TV from Panasonic AX630, which is actually pretty good. I've got the EE-TV box coming in this week at some point, which is a go at the TV market for broadband and phone subscribers. Does records 4 at once off Freeview, so that should be interesting if you can find 4 decent things to watch off there. And I've got a little portable speaker from Philips, similar to the Cambridge thing.
Excellent. So that's the upcoming reviews, and that is the hardware. Have we got anything for games?
Cue that sound of wind. Phil.
Well, I could do about the Google Nexus Player.
Okay, on you go.
Oh right, that was my intro, was it?
Yeah, that's your intro. Go on.
All right, fair enough. You spoil me. Yeah, Google have announced their Nexus Player. So this is kind of carrying on from, they've had huge success with Chromecasting and obviously smartphones. And so they're kind of trying to tie everything together. Hot on the heels of Amazon's Fire TV. It's going to be $99. The same out in the US on November the 3rd. A little hiccup with pre-orders because it didn't appear to be approved by the FCC at the time, but looks like it's still on course for early November. Yeah, basically they're kind of trying to add gaming into things. So you've got a dedicated control pad which you can buy separately, but it'll come with a mini remote with a mic for voice control. Intel Atom CPU, only 8 gigabytes of storage. Now it doesn't look like it's going to be expandable, which might be a bit of a problem because if you consider what smartphones have these days and the fact that certain titles on the Google Play Store can be, the more sophisticated titles can be around a gig, that could fill up pretty quickly. But obviously, the big selling point about this is going to be trying to get people to use the baked-in search and recommendation system, Google's algorithm. And as they've said recently, that they see Amazon as their main competitor rather than Microsoft. They're obviously wanting to trying to make inroads into that idea of one kind of Android set-top box that will do everything rather than what we've got at the moment, which is so fragmented. And given that Google have, kind of more money than the average country, they're perhaps one of the few companies that might actually be able to bring that dream to reality.
I've got to say, on a slightly ungames related note, the Nexus 6 phone specs I don't know if anyone's been looking at those. They look quite something. That's a very.
They
nice
usually put
looking...
their smartphones out for considering the specs for very good prices, don't they?
Well, this is interesting because it looks, all signs point to the Nexus 6 actually being. It'll still be cheaper than an iPhone, although that said, so are a number of cars and houses in Hull and things like that. But it's actually going to be quite a bit more expensive than the Nexus 5. But it takes some of the features from that Motorola Google phone that we didn't get in the UK, and then it's just sort of then Nexused it up. But I've got a Nexus 5, and it's a fairly prosaic looking thing. It goes like the clappers. It's a good phone, but this is a much more premium looking device, and I'm sort of looking at it with right up until this morning when I received an enormous and angry invoice from the student loans company, I was quite keen on the idea of getting one. So yeah.
Anyway, Mark.
Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome.
Back on topic.
Well, I didn't know if perhaps Hodge had any views on this. Given that he's...
I do like a little black box. It just seems to be a bit of a lack of apps it's got at the moment, considering it is Google. And my experiences with Android TV when I reviewed, it was a Sony thing, I think it was. Yes, it was. There was a real lack of support for Android TV. So I mean, obviously, it's all very well having loads of tablet and phone apps, but if they don't work on the big screen, then it's hardly ideal. And looking at what's they're coming out with, I'm surprised at the lack of apps that it's got. So if you compared it to something like the Rocket, which is absolutely trounce it. Of course, you're looking at it from a gaming perspective. It's going right up against the Fire TV. Almost like the controller looks almost identical, doesn't it? I don't know. It'll all come down to the number of apps it's got for me. And there's no mention of a UK release yet, and we seem to get neglected a lot, and content deals are notoriously tricky in Europe and in the UK. So we'll have to see what support it gets when it gets. I'm interested, but I'm cautiously interested at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if it ends up as straight dollars to pounds kind of conversion, then if it was anywhere around the £100 mark, and then you had to buy a separate controller with it, then you're in kind of PS3 360 territory, and
you are you for that for 100, because the controller's about $40, isn't it? So it's going to be 40 quid over there, so 140 quid. Yeah, you might be better just getting a proper console, which will have more video streaming apps anyway at launch anyway.
Yeah.
So the verdict is
meh.
Maybe.
Maybe. It's a nice looking little kind of box they've put it in. It's a round design, so it looks like one of those little robot hoovers.
Yeah, I like it.
And that's my in-depth analysis.
Right, okay. And obviously the Games podcast is out at the moment. Is it worthwhile people downloading?
Of course it is. We touch on Ubisoft and locking games at 30 frames a second, Microsoft's Room Alive. We reminisce a little bit about peripherals of yesteryear. Steve spent a little bit of time with Alien Isolation before we got to record the poddy, and what's going on with Destiny.
And what is going on with Destiny?
Some people like it, some people hate it. Some people, like me, are getting very bored very, very quickly and think that we'll probably trade it in quickly.
I quite like the look of Alien Isolation. It looks like it could be a really good game.
Yeah, it's getting...
Visually, at least, it looks... They beautifully recreated the look of the original Alien movie.
Yeah, well, they seem to have taken this view, which is kind of the environment can tell the story as well as kind of any cutscene or anything like that, and it's an approach that's been slowly growing in gaming, where fewer cutscenes and more trying to tell a story through just the places that you walk through, how the atmosphere affects you, and that kind of thing. And it's supposed to be very scary though, and that's why I shall be a total wuss and not be playing it.
I like you massive girl's blouse.
I still get. I went back and played on an old PlayStation, the original Resident Evil, and I still jump when the dogs fly through the window.
Pussy.
So, yeah, fine. I'm absolutely fine with that. I've come to terms with it.
And is that the games news?
That is games news.
Right, so moving on to movie news. And Steve, what's at the cinema?
knows, I didn't go. There was nothing remotely interesting on this week. It was really, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, couldn't care less. So I decided to vote with my feet and not to go to the cinema. There was a film I wanted to see, an Aussie horror film, but it wasn't showing at any of the cinemas near me. So
You weren't interested in Turtles?
no, not remotely. Or the Maze Runner.
I've got to
Or
be
the
honest,
Judge.
the Turtles one, it looks, I don't know who it's pitched at. It looks too dark for kids who love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And, as a 33-year-old man, I'm not going anywhere near it because, I'm not, I don't think I don't know who the target audience is. I'm baffled by it, but I'm baffled by a lot of things these days.
Yeah, let's not go there. That could be another hour.
My wife went to see Maze Runner. She said it was a bit disappointing. So
Yeah. I didn't. I mean, I'm sick of all these young adult.
it's not just that; it's yet another film set up for there to be like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, Steve, as a movie reviewer, you just don't go, you don't just go to the movies you're gonna like. You got to.
I've done enough shit this year to last a lifetime. Come on.
But you're supposed to sit through this shit so we don't have to.
I know,
Yeah.
but sometimes you just think, well, it's not worth the grief. Well, next week Fury's out, which I'm quite looking forward to. David Ayer's film with Brad Pitt. When they, based on a single day, I think, towards the end of World War II, and it's about tank crew, and it looks quite good. So I'm going to see that. And then the week after, it's Interstellar, the new Christopher Nolan movie, which I'm really, really looking forward to. So there's some good stuff coming up.
Saw the
Just
trailer
as a
for
brilliant
that,
aside, Milton Keynes Cineworld was initially listing Fury showings when they go as furry, which I thought was brilliant.
This is the same place that had the mums and kids screening of Labour Day, isn't it?
Yes, yeah,
So
they're
prone
just
to the odd
on,
gaffe
they're
then,
just
aren't they?
on fire.
Right, so let's look forward to some Blu-rays then. Steve, coming out next week, we've got Godzilla, Mrs. Brown's Boys, the movie, Once Upon a Time in America, and some rubbish called Withnail I.
I mean, Godzilla, I saw it at the cinema. It's had really good reviews, actually. And I've got to say, I thought not enough Godzilla, and frankly, it's a bit silly. Although it was trying to be quite serious. But, at the end of the day, it's still a giant monster, and there's no getting around that fact. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was as good as some people are saying it is. I know it has had some quite impressive reviews, and some people have even talked about maybe one of the top 10 films of the year, which is ludicrous in my opinion. It's well made, and it's got some really nice scenes in it. But I'm sure it'll be a great disc. I'm sure it'll look gorgeous and it'll sound fantastic. I mean, the sound's going to be incredible on it. But I just found it to be a bit boring, and I didn't care about the human characters, and there wasn't enough Godzilla and monster action for my money, considering that's what you're paying to see, and the film's called it. Mrs. Brown's Boys, the movie, I sadly did sit through this piece of shit, Phil, so you can't say I've avoided all the rubbish films this year. It's awful. Don't buy it unless you I don't know, you just want to spite somebody.
No, don't. Even if you want to spite someone, just don't give any further money to this franchise. Stop encouraging them. They'll make more.
Did it do well at the box office? I don't really know.
No, I don't
I
think
hope
it did.
not.
No.
Good. Once Upon a Time in America. This is the director's cut. So this originally, when it was first released back in 1984, it was Sergio Leone's last film. Unfortunately, he died 5 years later. He originally wanted it to be, he was originally talking about doing it as a two movies, so 2 3-hour movies, which probably would have gone down quite well these days, but back then, no chance. So he managed to cut it down to about 215 minutes, but in the States, it was cut down even further. But there was always this rumoured longer cut, which he, I think, screened at Cannes. And this is basically that cut. They kind of pieced it back together again. The quality of some of the new footage isn't as good as the overall, as the normal theatrical version. But this is a 251-minute version. So we're talking about 4 hours and 11 minutes. I've got this disc, but haven't had a chance to watch it yet because it's 4 hours and 11 minutes long. Kaz has done his review, which went up at the weekend. I think if you're a fan of this movie, you'll love to watch. I mean, it basically just adds character beats here and there and expands certain scenes. But if you love the film, then you'll enjoy watching the longer cut. If you're not a fan, 4 hours and 10 minutes was already pretty long to begin with. But I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's one of the great gangster films of all time. And certainly, if you're a fan, you'll already know that. So pick it up. The UK version is just the new extended cut. The US version, you can buy it as a 2-disc set with the original theatrical cut as well. But in my opinion, I love Sergio Leone. He only made it 7 movies, so it's worth seeing. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it. If you have seen it, it's worth getting the longer cut just out of curiosity. And then finally, Withnail I, which I'm sure Mark Hodgkinson will back me up, is one of the funniest films ever made.
If not the funniest film ever made.
It's certainly the most quotable film of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming out in a box set next week. I've got mine on order. I know Mark's got his on order.
I've got mine on order.
Yeah, have you?
I have.
Yep. And it's looking pretty good. It's got a new 2K restoration of the film from the original camera negative, supervised by the director of photography. It's also got Bruce Robinson's follow-up feature, How to Get Ahead in Advertising, also completely restored from the original camera negative. Both of those available on Blu-ray in the same package, which is quite nice. It's got an audio commentary on Withnail I by director-writer Bruce Robinson. It's also an audio commentary by critic and writer Kevin Jackson, who authored the BFI Modern Classic book on it, on the film Withnail I. There are the 4 original documentaries that were screened on Channel 4 back in 1999. There's some new interviews with behind-the-scenes crew from Withnail I. There's a hardback book that comes with it, theatrical trailers. I mean, basically, it's a pretty nice package for, I think it's 39
quid on Amazon.
50 quid, basically 40 quid, yeah. It looks like, if you're a fan of Withnail I, this is like the package to get. And seriously, if you haven't seen Withnail I, watch it. It is side-splittingly funny.
Well, I haven't seen it.
Well, I'm going to post you my old Blu-ray film, so you will get a chance to watch it soon.
That's not the greatest quality, is it, the transfer that?
No, but I mean, it's the gags are still there, right? So
yeah,
enjoy the jokes. So yes, if you're a fan, I'm sure you've already got this on order, and if you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend you do. It's brilliant.
I think you've probably overhyped that now.
Maybe slightly sold that one, yeah.
But anyway, there's a lot of strange people out there who, and I've been guilty of this in the past, and I think everybody here has been guilty of this in the past. We've gone out and bought Blu-rays or DVDs just for the picture and sound, even though the movie is rubbish. Is that true or false? Am I talking rubbish, or is that a common thing for home cinema enthusiasts?
I think particularly in the early days of HD and Blu-rays and HD DVD, then yeah, you were just buying it just to test out your TV or your projector or your system. I bought some. Early on, I've got rid of most of them now. I'm not a person that really buys movies a lot. I used to rent. I'm a watch once kind of guy generally.
So you were a rent boy.
I'm a rent boy. Confirmed and proud. But yeah, things like King Kong and Avatar, I suppose. You know, you were just buying it. That was 3D more than just pure HD. But yeah, just kind of buying stuff for the sake of it. That's 2 that stand out for me. Although I didn't buy Avatar, did I?
It was more of a problem with DVDs for me when I was doing more test work than I do now, and you had to test all of the formats that a receiver was technically able to handle. So I mean, I've got Final Destination 3. I think because it was the only thing I could find to hand at the time, which was had a DTS ES 6.1 soundtrack on it. And to this day, I've only watched ever watched the first roller coaster scene. That's all I've ever needed to do. It was like, yeah, it works, and then just put it back in the wallet.
There was a time where I bought loads of stuff from Japan. I think Botwright might have done this as well, because you're a fan of Asian cinema. So I don't know if you bought your DVDs through CD-Web, but I used to spend a fortune buying stuff like Armageddon in DTS, because it was the only version available in DTS. I don't particularly like the film, but it was the disc to have because it was the only one that had the DTS soundtrack. I mean, DTS nowadays, like we were saying earlier on, is on every Blu-ray, or almost every Blu-ray, but back then Dolby ruled the roost, and getting your hands on DTS laserdiscs or DTS DVDs, sometimes it was the holy grail, going out and trying to get. I mean, I remember the fuss about Jurassic Park coming out in DTS on DVD and
on Laserdisc even.
On Laserdisc and then on DVD with a DTS soundtrack. It used to be the big thing. Oh, got to have the DTS soundtrack because it's a higher bit rate and all the rest of it. And you'd buy some shit, you really would.
Yeah, I mean, no, you go.
I was guilty of sin for buying shit on Laserdisc to watch because it's going to look and sound good, and buying shit on DVD. Sometimes the same shit too, which is even worse. Then on HD DVD, and then on Blu-ray. I mean, I've got all 4 Transformers films on Blu-ray now, and there's no excuse for that other than I don't even like them. I hate them.
Yeah.
The first Transformers, actually, it's not true. The first Transformers film wasn't that bad. I quite enjoyed it. It was okay. And I thought, well, the disc would be nice, look and sound good, which it does. And I for some strange reason, even though I'd seen it at the cinema and hated it, I bought Revenge of the Fallen on disc. Again, I think that was because it would look and sound good. And I walked out of the cinema during Dark of the Moon, but ended up buying the disc because I wanted the 3D Blu-ray. I sat through the whole of the fourth one because I was reviewing it earlier in the summer, and now I've got to buy that bastard too because it's got the Atmos soundtrack on it.
No, you can. There are other Atmos releases now. There's a step up film, which I'm sure.
That's really. Yeah, Expendables 3. I'll get that disc. I'll get the Expendables 3 because A, I haven't seen it, and B, I have the two other Expendables films, and it's going to have an Atmos soundtrack, so it'll save me from having to watch too much of Transformers. But yeah, I do kind of feel slightly, I'm very ashamed that I own all 4 Transformers movies on Blu-ray, even though I genuinely hate them.
And you didn't go and see Turtles.
do you know what? I've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the previous film they did, which was all CG animation, on HD DVD. And you know why I've got that? Because my bloody girlfriend told me, oh, it's really good, you should buy it. Then I found out afterwards she was actually promoting that film anyway and doing the merchandising rights for it in Asia, which she neglected to mention to me at the time. Actually,
I remember. Do you remember was it early 90s one with the Snap tune as the main theme piece? I think I've got that on 7-inch vinyl somewhere.
Yeah, well, you were like 6 at the time then, Mark. You probably were the target audience.
Yeah, I was. And unlike the current film where I have no idea, again, who the target audience is. From an audio perspective, I've got different... I mean, I don't generally buy Blu-rays now unless I physically want to watch the film. I have enough test material to be going on with. I'm not rushing into Atmos installation, so I'm good with that. I'll probably pick up Edge of Tomorrow because I quite like the idea of watching that.
It's really good.
Good, excellent. I like Emily Blunt as well. But more recently, during the early phases of testing UPnP streamers, just getting your hands on high-resolution music, any high-resolution music, means that you'd end up with some absolute horrors, just because there was so little to choose from. So yeah, I mean, I've got another. I've got Fleetwood Mac's Rumours on vinyl. I've got an HD CD copy of it, which I paid an embarrassing sum of money for some time ago, and I've got the 96K high res version of it as well. Because in terms of being able to test material with something where you had at least the vaguest understanding of what it was supposed to sound like, you couldn't be too picky. I have the vaguest understanding of what it sounds like. I just don't like it that much, but I own 3 copies of it. So, different problems. But I will say things have got a lot better though, because the new Aphex Twin album, which actually by the standards of Aphex Twin is quite easy to get into. It's not the sort of challenging listen of some of his earlier works. You can buy that easy as you like. It's not desperately high. It's only 2444.1, but you can buy a nice high-resolution copy, download it completely legit in the UK for 11 quid, which I think is pretty reasonable, really. That's the sort of thing that actually might encourage people to pay a bit more attention to it.
And have you bought shit on vinyl?
I've bought some more shit on vinyl since we last spoke, but that's... ironically, at the moment, I can't use my turntable. As anyone that's seen my Facebook, I've bought this enormous new testing AV rack, which is splendid. It's really good. I love it. It's one of the more sensible things I've purchased. But at the moment, I haven't got around to getting the telly up on the wall, and the turntable's on the top, and the telly is on the top shelf on its IKEA plastic box. And you can't open the lid of the turntable without fouling the television. So until the television's up on the wall, for which there is still no confirmed date, I've just got a stack of vinyl that I've yet to listen to. And it's slightly embarrassed to say that I think it's got 25 or 30 pieces in it. So there'll be a lot of work, a lot of listening to do when I finally get the turntable up and running. I think the whole idea of buying any medium, be it audio, be it video, be it whatever, just for the quality of it, thankfully... Although there's always brand new areas which are an exception to the rule, so Atmos and ultra high resolution audio, things like that, where at the moment there's just still not that much content, so you can't be that picky. Across any other remotely mainstream aspects of listening, you thankfully have enough choice that you don't have to just buy the only available thing. You can now buy you can just buy the something that you actually want to watch or listen to, and it isn't the problem that it once was. I mean, I remember, I remember when the period that Phil was talking about, oh gosh, you can buy the Japanese version of Total Recall, which has got a DTS soundtrack. And it became the de facto one that you wanted to own. But although I'm sure that there is still as you said with the Sergio Leone film, there's a degree of variation between the American release and the British release. It's not necessarily the sort of differences which are going to get you, crawling over broken glass to get the US version. So you just go with the one that best suits you.
I think the last time we had anything similar to that on DVD was HD DVD Blu-ray, when that was all going on. I think it was there's a bit of you have to have that because it's on HD DVD, and you were buying stuff that they weren't great films, but you were buying them because they were on the format and you were trying to support the format. And do you think we will see the same if we get 4K Blu-ray? And Steve, the only film released on it is Mrs. Brown's Boys, the movie. 4K with an Atmos soundtrack. You're going to buy it, aren't you?
Yeah, probably. Well, I think I might have to draw the line at that. But it's going to be Transformers, isn't it? It's going to be 4K Blu-ray of Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, and I'm going to have to sit through that. But there are times. To be fair, though, I mean, sometimes you just want, if you're a reviewer, then having films that are known for having particularly good picture, Blu-rays have particularly good picture or sound quality clearly is handy for doing reviews with. And everyone likes to show off the system to their friends when they come around. And sometimes you have a disc where you want to show. I'm trying to think of a good example. I know you used a couple of scenes from King Kong in your testing, but there's always, everyone used to, remember there was that time when everyone used to show the scene when Lilu jumps off of the ledge on The Fifth Element. That was like the de facto demo scene to show your friends when they came round.
To be honest, that doesn't happen to me anymore. Anyone that walks into my lounge goes, "Oh my god, is that a record player?" And then the rest of it is irrelevant.
Well, I've owned The Fifth Element quite a few times, and it's a shit film.
I've got a soft spot for it.
But do you keep buying it simply because you've bought it on other formats? So therefore, it's something that you can see the difference in. So like your litmus test for kind of AV.
Well, I do have that with Apocalypse Now. I've owned that in too many formats.
Do you like that film?
I do love it as well.
So I'm saying when it comes to a truly terrible film that you've already owned on a few formats, are you kind of almost like locked into the inevitability of you will buy it on a new format just to see because you know that so well?
I don't think I've got anything where that's the case. Thankfully, I've not been locked into that. So I've had that problem with audio, but with film, no. I've only ever owned multiple copies of films I actually sort of like. Yeah, I mean, I do that with Transformers. I'm not Transformers, with Terminator 2, which in fairness isn't a terrible film, but it's not like my favourite film. But I have owned that on every single conceivable video format you can imagine.
Yeah, I have as well. That and probably Jurassic Park are the two which I think I've had on every single, and Star Wars original trilogy.
But again, I don't hate
I've had Dune on a lot of formats as well.
Say it again.
I don't hate watching Jurassic Park though. It's not something I'd want to watch week in, week out.
No,
but
it's a classic.
It's a cracker.
Yeah.
I watched a VHS the other day, so
You what?
I watched a VHS the other day.
Watched it do what?
Of a film. I found an old film that I just thought, I want to see what it's like. And I watched it on an old CRT. And to be honest, I got into it. I didn't mind it.
Oh, bless.
Where did you find a CRT and a VHS player?
Yeah.
I went down to stay with family and my old kind of childhood bedroom.
1984.
No, I'll tell you, this is the thing though. If you like certain foreign films, you are always one generation behind with kind of the quality and the format. So there are some Hong Kong
VHS
films.
is more than one generation behind.
No. I know. I've just never bothered buying the DVD because that itself is still going for about 20 quid. and the Blu-ray itself would cost me, a lot more. And so there are certain films where, should we say, they've never made the jump in quality. Like the Blu-rays are literally, they look upscaled DVDs themselves.
What was the film you watched?
I watched, there was a kung fu film called Warriors 2, made by Sammo Hung, and I don't care. I enjoyed it.
Good for you.
Good for you.
That's the end of that anecdote.
Yeah, the problem is that I mean, as I say, vintage cinephile stuff, it just does, ultimately vinyl kind of holds up because of, there haven't been the same jumps in audio quality. Your ears are a fixed quantity, and so that's fine. And there's a huge amount of media to choose from. I can't see there being a sort of key. I mean, I'm sure there is a VHS appreciation society, but I can't see it, pushing for many new releases of current films. I mean, do new films get a VHS release for some horrifying corner of the world that hasn't bothered with it?
No.
I bet they do.
I bet you do.
I bet you get it, some kind of knockoffs in Cuba or something like that.
Fair enough.
I don't think people even make the tapes anymore. It just doesn't exist as a format.
So all those ones I found, I can flog to someone. Take to the third world.
You can probably find some lunatic on the classifieds who'll buy it off you.
But I mean, this is where it gets interesting because obviously I was decidedly wondering this the other day. I was doing the standard input tally for this Yamaha 3040, and it's got 8 HDMI inputs and then enough legacy connections to keep another sort of 4 or 5 devices happy. And it sort of gets to the point of just what are you connecting to it? I mean, I know Hodge has got his 78 little boxes from various tests, so he could in theory have them all running side by side. But I think he counts as an outlier on this one. So yeah, I don't know what people are finding to. I mean, if you are listening to this and you have 8 HDMI sources, please do get in touch and tell us what the hell they are.
If you're a gamer,
I reckon I could fill that up.
Yeah, a game. Anyone that keeps all the consoles will probably have 8, won't they? Easily. Wii U.
Yeah, but hang on a second. All the consoles, that's fair enough, but they're not all HDMI capable. You're only going back to the last generation for HDMI.
No, all right, fine. I'd stick in HTPC, PS4, PS3, Xbox 360, Xbox One. That's 5 thus far. Wii U.
Blu-ray player.
Yeah, Blu-ray player. Yeah,
Skybox.
still got a DVD. Stick in it. Something like that. That would take me up to 8.
Fair enough. I stand corrected, said the man in the orthopedic shoe.
I've just reviewed an Optoma projector that dropped one. Normally projectors have 2 HDMI inputs. This one had dropped one in favour of a VGA input, which is fairly unusual these days, a DVI input, which is really unusual these days, and an S-video input, which
awesome.
I'm sure no one's using. So I'm not quite sure who exactly Optoma are aiming that one at.
Actually, it must be said, a lot of most AV receivers now have no S-video connectivity, which if you are a full-on retro console enthusiast is a bit of a pain in the arse, because they were anything with a US sort of bent to it was always set up primarily for S-video. So yeah, that's actually quite annoying, but it must be for somebody somewhere. But
well, this brings us back to kind of what we were talking about at the top of the podcast about AVRs and adding all these new sound formats. Whereas, actually, I think the AVR needs a total redesign from the top to the bottom.
Well, yes, it's part. There's an element of that, but the problem is we've had this discussion. And there's elements of what that redesign should be. The biggest problem is that anything truly radical, Phil, means that you are chopping everything, and that limits your customer base to the truly bold who feel that it's going to be the way forward. And we are an inherently conservative industry, and you can watch this as we're just chasing an ever smaller number of customers with ever ritzier versions of the same box.
I think consumers would be more inclined to buy an AVR if it was less intimidating. When you look at the back totally. Panels and some of those things, they're insanely complex.
Yeah, we've had this conversation before, but yeah, totally. It needs redesigning, it needs rethinking, and rather than, you said earlier, Ed, speaker manufacturers need to think out of the box. I think AVR manufacturers need to start thinking out of the box in terms of design, flexibility, usability, and
quite literally out of their box.
Yeah, totally. Otherwise, that market's just going to dwindle away, because I know people who in the past have been absolute major AV nuts, and would spend a fortune on the biggest Denon or Pioneer that could get their hands on. 5 speakers, 4 subwoofers, all the rest of it. The family comes along, they start having kids and so on, and that Meridian system or whatever it was that they dreamed about and had all set up, it suddenly turns into a soundbar.
Well, I mean, there's another. It has to be said. Obviously, I recently reviewed, and it's up, and you can read it. That name Muso thing. I have to say that there was a point where I was watching my son busily trying to tear the volume knob off one of the amplifiers, and I was thinking, God, actually, this does make a huge amount of sense, because he can't reach any of the controls on it, and it just sits there, and it sounds pretty damn good. And it's entirely self-contained.
Yep.
And then I slapped myself about a bit and had a beer, and I felt better. But no, I know what you're saying, and there is that. Occasionally we get disparaging at how one box stuff is just eating away progressively at more bespoke solutions. But there's no arguing the fact that the one box stuff is getting an awful lot better, and it just has so much more basic showroom appeal.
Yeah, totally. More lifestyle, and that's the way everything's moving these days, and maybe it's a sign of maybe another 10 years or whatever we'll be back to having big boxes and loads of speakers in the living room, but I doubt it.
No, we'll be beaming it straight into your head with a big spike like the Matrix by then. It'd be fantastic. I look forward to having my spike socket fitted.
That sounded wrong.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, I think that is it for this week. I think we've gone on enough, and
we've filled an hour.
We've filled an hour, and that is it for the AVForums podcast this week. Don't forget, if you've got your Ask the Idiots questions, send them via Twitter at AVForums, or put them in the feedback forum underneath this podcast, and we'll get round to them next week. So I need to thank Steve Withers.
A great day, comrades. We sail into history.
Mark Hodgkinson.
I was going to do that one. We're going. I'm going to do a Russian accent. Hang on a minute. I can't do it. Sorry, hang on a minute. We're going to kill a friend, Yevgeny. We're going to kill Ramius. Terrible. Sorry.
Mark Botwright.
The officers and I will submerge beneath you.
Oh, and Ed Selley.
Let them sing.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news and video, and why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you again next Wednesday.